Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. I've got a question. What the hell happened? Because Bethesda, well, actually no, ZeniMax themselves are being purchased by Xbox. This did not just come out of left field, this come from out of orbit. And it's leaving the game industry right now, to be honest with you, in shock. And I'm not trying to be, hyping things up, but people are just like, what the hell? Twitter is going absolutely ballistic. I was going to read out a whole spiel, PR stuff, and, there'll be screen caps of it in the video, which you can check out if you so desire. But just to give you the highlights here, Satya Nadella has gone out to say that, games are obviously very important for connecting people and playing with people, and also said that Bethesda have great success in just about every category of game. Phil Spencer has then pointed out that now that the next generation Xboxes will go on pre-order tomorrow, they are now going to be focusing on demonstrating their games. And in this instance, of course, they have Bethesda and all of the other studios under ZeniMax. And, the amount of cash that is being coughed up here by Microsoft is $7.5 billion US. That's a lot of dollars. Obviously, they must have dug under their couch a little bit, checked their jean pockets, and they kind of found the money necessary. Because this is also taking over 2,300, actually over 2,300 employees. We're looking at Bethesda Softworks as well as Game Studios, id, or ID if you prefer, ZeniMax Online Studios, Arkane, Machine Gun Games, Tango Gameworks, AlphaDog, Roundhouse Studios, and by goodness, I mean the IPs which we are talking about here. Of course, the highlights would be, Fallout and Elder Scrolls and Doom, which honestly, right there, if Microsoft had just come out and said, you know what, we've bought Elder Scrolls, and we have bought Doom, people would lose their minds just on that alone. Although, I guess you could argue that Outer Worlds is kind of that, but done right. After a couple of travesties from Bethesda. But anyway. But we're also talking about Rage from id Software. We're talking about Wolfenstein. We're talking about, The Evil Within, which I think is a fantastic game. I think The Evil Within has a ton of potential. It just needs a few tweaks here and there. But as a game, solid. I think both of them are amazing. I played through Evil Within 2 on the Xbox One X and Evil Within 1 on the PC? Or am I getting those confused? I don't know. Something like that. Prey, again, amazing. Dishonored 2 and 1. All of those, the Dishonored series are amazing. I actually bought Dishonored 2 to try out on the PS4 Pro. Amazing game, super fun. Wolfenstein, what more is there to say? Doom, obviously we've just had Doom Eternal, plus all of the DLC, but it's also the upcoming games like Starfield. And they've actually confirmed that Starfield, as well as the next Elder Scrolls, will not be on the current engine, which is good, because I don't think the current engine is doing too well anymore. It's kind of the Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good, or Mr. Howard, I don't feel so good stage. It's no longer held together by duct tape. It's now held together by the tears of the programmers who are trying to make it work after all these years. It's about as scalable like Mount Everest without any climbing gear at all, and you have no arms and legs that you're able to use, and also the mountain is covered in snow, and you also get hit with a boulder. It's like that level of scalability on the engine. I'm sorry, but yeah, that engine is not good. I might be just a smidge bitter, just a little bit, that I was playing through like Fallout, New Vegas, and one of the quests didn't spawn properly. I might be just slightly annoyed at that, in case you couldn't tell. But, what the hell, for example, is Starfield? So there are a ton of questions that, honestly, as of the time I'm recording, I can't answer. because no one really knows. I mean, the obvious thing is that these games are going to start becoming on Game Pass, so that Evil Within, Prey, blah blah blah, which honestly is a huge shot of adrenaline to Game Pass. Not that Game Pass is bad now, but like, it kind of feels like this plugs a lot of the weaknesses that were in the Xbox's lineup. Now, this is not to say that they don't need Halo. This is not to say that they don't need the next Fable, and so on and so on. And arguably, there are still some weaknesses in the Xbox lineup, like JRPGs. They have had some mileage, but still not where they need to be, just as an example. But I do believe that Microsoft, with this acquisition alone, have done tremendous work. There's still a lot of ambiguity as of the time I'm recording this, because Phil Spencer has been talking to Bloomberg, and he mentioned that Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo will still be PlayStation 5 timed exclusives, which, if you think about it, is kind of bizarro world that Microsoft, technically speaking, will be publishing 2 timed exclusive games for Sony's platform. That's just weird. And secondly, how all of these PR statements from both companies are mentioning how tight the ties are between Microsoft and ZeniMax/Bethesda, and yet, of course, there were in the works 2 timed exclusives to the PS5, but that's beside the point. But for other games, such as Elder Scrolls, we don't know what is going to happen, because obviously they will launch on the Xbox and PC, guaranteed, but other consoles are, quote, on a case-by-case basis. And this is why I kind of am in a two minds situation, because it's very real, and a very real possibility, that if you own a PS5, you will not be able to play a game like the new Fallout if you only own a PS5. Now, you can technically play it with cloud streaming, which I'm sure is a very deliberate move by Microsoft. I suspect there's a lot of emphasis for xCloud, or cloud streaming, but I'm kind of in two minds about this. From a personal perspective, this doesn't affect me too much. I will attempt to pre-order an Xbox Series X. I've already got my PS5 pre-order locked in, I think. And it kind of is like one of those situations where, from one hand, Sony have definitely done some stuff in the past. They've obviously thrown a ton of money around, like the aforementioned Deathloop timed exclusivity, but there are other games as well, like Final Fantasy 16, and obviously we see, Demon's Souls and all of these other games. Plus, Sony have purchased studios. Now, this is not, again, to say that I am in agreement or disagreement with Sony doing this, but back in the day, like with the PS1 and PS2, one of the reasons that Sega essentially went out of business was because, a console business, they obviously still make games. Well, one reason was basically that the Sega Saturn was a pain in the ass to develop for. It really was. It was absolutely nightmarish to develop for, with its very unique architecture, but also Sony were throwing tons of money to get titles on their system. Furthermore, the N64, of course, wasn't so much the difficulty in developing for it, although, there were limitations of its system as well. But the other big problem with the N64, and it's an obvious one, is the cartridge format. That's famously one of the reasons that Square were like, yeah, no, we actually can't develop Final Fantasy then on your console. So, Sony throwing money around back then to kind of get that exclusivity, and they still do now. But then, simultaneously, I also feel really bad that a game like, let's just say Starfield, could theoretically never be released on the PlayStation format. Or maybe there'll be like a timed exclusivity, so maybe a year or 2 years or what have you. Again, you could possibly play it with like cloud streaming. And if you have a laptop, I guess it doesn't matter so much, or you've got a desktop PC, that's one way to do it. It's going to be really interesting to see how all of this works out, quite honestly. Yeah. I'm not really sure how I feel about that, to be honest. It's, with the previous generation, you could definitely argue that you only needed one of the consoles. Especially if you had an Xbox, buying a piece, if you had an Xbox, you were missing out on some of Sony exclusives, but there were not a huge amount released every year. Yes, there were big ones like the Uncharted or whatever, but, okay. If, on the other hand, you owned a PlayStation, you were going to miss out on the Gears games or whatever, although you can argue that if you had a PC it was less of a big deal, but up until recently, Halos for example, they were still locked onto the Xbox platform, they're slowly transitioning to PC, but this generation, it's looking to be very different. It's like, in one corner, you've got potentially games like Starfield, on the Microsoft platforms, and then from Sony's perspective, they're obviously pushing really hard as well, so I guess it's just going to be very, very, very interesting to see how the market deals with all of this. It's going to be very interesting to see how this, just how it all ends up. No one knows at the moment. I think the next couple of years in gaming is going to be amazing, and if you've been following along with the channel for a while, you know that I've multiple times said that Xbox is definitely working on a huge, or at least a couple of major acquisitions, like huge acquisitions. I didn't, reveal the studio, because I wasn't sure of the studio, but I knew that there were major talks going on behind the scenes for at least one massive acquisition. I think there's possible there's another one as well, and I definitely know there's tons of exclusive PlayStation games. So I would say with the previous generation, you could quite happily have gotten away with just one console. With this next generation, I'm not saying you have to buy both, because, well, it's still a large financial investment, but ideally you would. Then again, one good positive about this is with Xbox, of course, you do have xCloud, so yeah, all we can do is wait. I'm going to finish the video off though with a couple of other small things. The first of which is that Takashi Mashizuki, hopefully I've pronounced that correctly, has tweeted, it's a Japanese article, but you can of course use Google Translate and it does a fairly decent job with this. But the TLDR, they believe that the PS5 sales will exceed probably over 200 million. Which is a lot. Let's just be really blunt. That's a lot of consoles. Although it's unsurprising given how popular gaming is right now. Furthermore, a lot of analysts were surprised because of the cost of the console. People expected it to be like $100, $50 more expensive than it ended up being. Honestly, if you watch the channel regularly, you know that I've frequently said that I don't think the PS5 is going to be over $500. I think Microsoft and Sony knew that about the limit of $499 for either was like kind of pushing it, especially in today's climate. But the last piece of news, again, this is going to focus on Sony. AMD themselves have actually denied 7nm manufacturing issues with the PS5, although this primarily does seem to revolve around 7nm silicon itself. But it does naturally mean, because they are referring to all of the different variants of 7nm, this is from Forrest Norrod, who is the Vice President of AMD, and he primarily functions over at the Data Center and Embedded Division. But long story short, he said that there's no issues at the moment with chip manufacturing and supply. Supply of 7nm chips is sufficient, not just 7nm, but the entire supply chain from wafers to substrates. So essentially, now we have Sony, we have a secondary source which DigiTimes mentioned, but now we also have AMD, who have all confirmed that there are not manufacturing issues with the PlayStation 5's SoC/APUs. Personally, I don't think there is an issue with the PS5 manufacturing. I think yields are about what we expected, but I do think that Sony just handled the pre-orders like crap, and it was not helped at all, of course, by the way that retailers kind of just jumped on things early. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether this is fixed, because Sony have apologised, and you know what? I give them all the credit in the world for doing that. That's great. The worst thing is when companies just sweep things under the rug. I'm really happy that Sony apologised for that, and they've also doubled down and said that they will consistently get new shipments of the PlayStation 5 in. So, you know, don't worry if you didn't get your initial pre-order. They will attempt to, which is good because everywhere just sold out in seconds, obviously. So hopefully, the report that Sony had cut their forecast of 4 million consoles, it was down to just 11 million rather than 15 million, is bogus. It seems like it is to me. But with that said, thank you very much for watching the video. Normal stuff, like, share, comment and subscribe. And thank you everyone who has been new subscribers recently. This has been kind of a bitsy day because I don't know if I've mentioned this on video, but I'm currently getting ready to move, so I've done some other preliminary work. It's a very interesting time, to be honest, to move right now. What with the stuff that's going on in the world and all of the new console stuff that's happening in the not too distant future, plus new graphics card, you know, releases and all the stuff. So I'm trying to like time things, which is not working out so well. But yeah, content is going to be a bit slower, possibly on 1 or 2 days this week as I get things kind of ready to move to my new place. There shouldn't be any major downtime, with that said, but I am doing my best to keep things up. I am just about ready to finish the Xbox Series S script. I know I've said that like 3 times now, but it's just because there's been so many new bits of information. Like we just had the developer, I can't remember the chap's name, they're working on Dirt 5. They kind of added some more stuff in an interview with Eurogamer about Dirt 5 development on Xbox Series S. And there's been a few other things as well, so I don't want to just release a video and then it's not technically accurate because that's unfair to you and doesn't respect your time watching it. I'd rather be a bit later, get a few less views, but actually be technically accurate, or as close as I can be anyway when producing the video. So anyway, with that said, I'm going to run off. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.